Okay, so welcome everyone. This is our second class in our new mini-series about the Sefirot, and especially looking at the model of the Sefirot and the organizational paradigm, how we can use the Sefirot. Last week, we had our introduction. And so I want to review very, very quickly what we went over, because I want to be able to build on that. Tonight, we're going to continue our basic understanding of the structure of the Sefirot. And then next week, we will get into the individual Sefirot. But I think it's very, very important that we have the picture of the forest and not the individual trees. We need to see the bigger picture. So last week, we discussed the importance of models and paradigms and organizational structures in Kabbalah. That Kabbalah is actually very, very structured. And we're starting with the Sefirot, but we are going to continue and look at different names of God, the Hebrew letters, the levels of the soul, and the Kabbalistic worlds, and try to understand how we can use these in order to, in a sense, filter our experiences through these different models. So I'm going to share with everyone. What happened? 1 second. Oops. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay. Okay, here we go. I practice this all day long trying to get this right. Okay, so here we see really the super important fundamental of the Sefirot. As you can see, the 10 Sefirot manifest in 3 different ways. Number 1 is 10 manifestation of God's nature, energy, and light. Secondly, as 10 powers or faculties of the soul. And thirdly, 10 forces of nature revealed through creation. Now, these are different strata or different levels that the Sefirot manifest themselves. And these are very, very important to understand. Now, if we go to the next 1, 2, and 3, so this is a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov that fits perfectly, where he said that every letter, every situation, every reality has 3 levels of worlds, souls, and divinity. In other words, the letters and the Sefirot and the names of God and the levels of soul will manifest themselves in the physical material world, on the level of the soul, and as a manifestation of divine energy. So if we take world, souls, and divinity and apply them to the three different strata of the Sefirot, so here we see in worlds, these are the 10 forces of nature revealed through creation. That's the worlds, the material world. That these 10 Sefirot will be seen in the physical world. It's the channels through which an infinite God channels his energy into finite worlds. Then on the level of souls, so of course this is the 10 powers or faculties of the soul. And in divinity, the 10 manifestation of God's nature, energy, and light. Okay, so that was what we learned last week, and we really built on that. And then we discussed in the Sefer Yetzirah, the opening verse of Sefer Yetzirah, that through 32 pathways of wisdom, God created the world. And he did it through Sipur, Sefer, Svar, and Sipur, through form, number, and name. And of course, Sefer, Svar, and Sipur are the same root as Sefirah, as a Sefirot. So we're not going to go back deeply into it, but that is very important. And we shared that on the WhatsApp. If you remember, this we shared on the WhatsApp group, where we can see the 10 Sefirot. See, dot has a broken line around it, because when we count Keter, we don't count dot. When we count dot, we don't count Keter. That will explain hopefully next week. But here we have the 10 Sefirot, and then 22 letters connecting the Sefirot. And this is the 32 pathways of wisdom through which the world is created. This figure here is what many people refer to as the DNA of creation, the DNA of all reality and experience. That just like DNA is found in every cell in the body, and it, in a sense, directs how a living being will manifest itself, whether it's a plant or an animal or a human being. Same thing with this chart here. The letters and the Sefirot are the organizational principle through which all reality comes into play. So for those who haven't seen this, please look at your WhatsApp, and you'll have it anytime you want to refer to it. And then we went through different books that the idea of the Sefirot are mentioned. I'm not going to go over that again, but we mentioned especially the Sefer Yetzirah, which the first 2 chapters are all about the Sefirot. The Sefer Bahir, also an ancient Kabbalistic text. We found a few places in the Tanakh itself, especially in Divrei Yamim, and in our prayers where the Sefirot are mentioned. We learned about with Bezalel, the one who created the tabernacle, that he was blessed, graced with Chochmah, Bina, and Dat. And it's mentioned a number of times that Bezalel was graced with Chochmah, Bina, and Dat. We found places in Mishlei. So it's very important to see that the idea of the Sefirot is not a recent concept. Its roots go all the ways back. And according to tradition, the wisdom of the Sefer Yetzirah, even though it was edited later, but the wisdom goes all the way back to Avraham Avinu. And it's even the last Mishnah of Sefer Yetzirah mentions that it comes from Avraham Avinu. So that's what we did last week. That's how far we got. So now we're going to continue with that basis. And one thing we didn't mention, and it is very, very important, and that is the Zohar. The Zohar, just like we mentioned about the tradition of Sefer Yetzirah, goes back to Avraham Avinu, even though it was edited and prepared and ordered much, much later. I heard from Rav Ginsburg that there's a very good chance it was Rabbi Akiva who did the editing on Sefer Yetzirah. So the Zohar also, the Zohar was not, we'll call it, released for publication until the 1200s. But the tradition goes all the way back to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which was in around the year close to between 150 and 200 CE, actually a little bit earlier. So in the Zohar is a very enigmatic, symbolic, coded book that needs to be deciphered. But in most of the commentaries, they explain, especially if anyone's heard of the commentary called the Sulam, which means ladder. It's a very, very famous commentary from about 100 years ago, where virtually every single thing in the Zohar is explained as a coded language for the Sefirot. Now, it's just like we said that the Sefirot appear everywhere. They are the background, they are the reality through which everything is filtered. So this and many other commentaries of the Zohar see in virtually everything it says, it's a coded language that is connecting whatever it's talking about to the Sefirot. So that's very important to mention, because the Zohar is the foundational book of Kabbalah to this day. And to understand that there was mention of the Sefirot before, but the Zohar takes the Sefirot and puts it front stage and shows how the whole world can be seen and filtered through the teachings of the Zohar. Now, there's one other meaning of Sefirah that we didn't talk about, which I want to look at right now. We've talked about that it's in the same root as Sefer, book, of Svar, number, and Sipur, story, which we interpreted and translated into form, number, and name. Every letter has a name, it has a number, and it has a form. Well, the same thing with the Sefirot. The Sefirot have names. When we get into it deeper, we'll even start tonight, the numbers are very, very connected to the Sefirot. And it's telling a story. It has a form. This is the form of the Sefirot, as I just showed a minute ago. So the one place that a different meaning of Sefirot is mentioned is in Parashat Mishpating. This is in chapter 24, verse 10. This is talking about in the days leading up to the giving of the Torah, Moshe and Aaron and his sons and the elders went up on Mount Sinai. And it says like this, V'yar et Elohei Yisrael. They saw the God of Israel. God granted them this incredible vision. They saw the God of Israel. V'tachat raglav, and underneath his feet. Now, again, this is symbolic language. They had this vision, and in their imagination, it is translated into physical forms. But the physical forms is just symbolic. So it says, and under his feet, Kamase livnat hasapir. And under his feet were the workings of a shining brickwork. And it shined like the clearness and purity of heaven. So the word here is a sapir. And this is one of the important roots of the word Sefirot. Sefirot means shining, means glowing. So it's interesting that the Rashi brings a very unexpected, because here they're being shown a vision, and it's later on in the book of Isaiah. So he describes seeing God sitting on a throne. So here it's almost implied because it says tachat raglav. And so what it means, tachat raglav, is that the Sefirot is a way, again, of taking infinite light, energy, and life force and channeling it into a finite world. That is the function of the Sefirot. And so here the idea of under his feet means bringing it down. That's the whole idea of God sitting on a throne. So I see in the chat, yes, sapir means sapphire. That's where the word sapphire comes from, is sapir. There are many, many words in English that come from a Hebrew root. So here, and it's shining like the clearness of heaven. So this is also a deep, deep hint to the function of the Sefirot. I think we mentioned already, there was a question. Are the Sefirot, is it light or is it a vessel? Because in our series on light, we discussed lights and vessels. So the answer is both. And it depends on, in a sense, which world, because in all of the different spiritual worlds, the Sefirot are the channels, not just into the physical world, but all of the worlds. This is the way that God is able to create. Not he's able to, but he uses the Sefirot as his channels of creation. And so the Sefirot are a light, but it's also a vessel. The higher you go in the worlds, the more the light and the vessel are actually one. And that's how it's described in what's called Olam Ha'atzilut, in the world of emanation, where the lights and the vessels, and this applies to the Sefirot, were one. And so God, there's only one light shining in the world. It's all the light of God. And the Sefirot are like shining a light through a prism. Depending on how you turn the prism or the vessel will determine what kind of light is going to be shining. So the Sefirot are a light and a vessel. And here, this light is described as being as clear and pure as the essence of heaven. So I just brought that to show that the word Sefirot comes also from this idea of sapir, sapphire, shining. Okay, now, having said that, in Kabbalah, and this is going to explain more what we just talked about, lights and vessels, and the structure of the Sefirot as we see them today. So we're told that the Sefirot went through 3 stages of development, just like the worlds went through stages of development. We'll even call it the evolution of the worlds, or in Hebrew, hishtalshalut, the unfolding of creation. So in the highest level, it's called akudim, from actually the same word as Akedat Yitzchak. Akedat Yitzchak is the sacrifice of Yitzchak, but Akedat Yitzchak literally means the binding of Yitzchak. So we're told that in their first higher manifestation, all of the Sefirot were included in one vessel. And this one vessel was so close to the light itself, they were almost synonymous. But all the 10 lights of the Sefirot were shining into this one vessel. And from there, it progressed. And then the second, we'll call it hishtalshalut, progression of the Sefirot is called Nikudim, which means points. That's where the Sefirot became now 10 vessels, not just one vessel, but 10 vessels. And these 10 vessels I'm going to share with you right now. These 10 vessels were either in circles like this. The outside circle, if you see where my cursor is the highest one called Keter. And the most inner one is Malchut, called kingship. So the Sefirot morphed, we'll call it, progressed, unfolded from one vessel to 10 vessels, but in what's called igulim, in circles. Later, we're told that they progressed into either a line, like one sphera on top of each other, or in 2 lines. Now, this form over here on the left is the way we see the Sefirot now. And this is called brodim. These are 3 terms, akudim, nikudim, and brodim. These terms are actually very enigmatically mentioned when Yaakov is transforming the sheep of Lavan, and he's able to make them in a way that they all turn out to be striped or speckled. And so these words, akudim, nikudim, brodim, you'll find in the story of Yaakov transforming the sheep of Lavan. And later Kabbalah took these terms and applied it to these concepts. But the important thing, which I want to get into now, is this is the way that we see the Sefirot today. This is how we see the Sefirot. I'm going to get even a better picture of this. Okay, here. Now, in the Zohar, there is a section, it's called one of the most mysterious sections of the Zohar. It's called Sefirot, which can be translated the Book of Modesty. Sefirot. And it begins by saying, how long are we going to stand on one foot? As long as we're standing on one foot, there's no balance and harmony in the world. So what does he mean? What did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai mean? He was explaining, and we've mentioned this before, that the previous world that were the circles, or the Sefirot were the circles, is called Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos. And that's the world that broke in Shvirat HaKelim, in the breaking of the vessels. The breaking of the vessels were that because of the alignment of the Sefirot, either in just one line, one on top of the other, or in two lines, where each of the Sefirot, there was no cooperation, as it were. There was no synergy between the Sefirot. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is explaining, and the Arizal said that this world is called Olam HaTikun. And therefore, this structure of a middle column and two side columns, this is the structure of rectification. And this, we're going to spend a good part of the rest of the class trying to understand that, because everyone's familiar with what's called the yin yang, the symbol of the yin yang, where you have two components, which represents duality. Now that's fine. This is not a moral judgment on the yin yang, but that's an example of a symbol that expresses duality. Well, it's true. There's duality everywhere. The first letter in the Torah is a big bet, and it represents duality. But here, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was saying is tikkun has to do with three, with two extremes and a middle column that will combine them and make harmony from them. So I'm going to show you one more. What is that? One. Okay, what is that? No, one second. No, I'm sorry. This is what we call thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. That's what I'm trying to get to here. That's what I'm trying to get to here. That this idea of the Sefirot, like we see them here in three lines, is the idea of thesis, antithesis, and then synergy. And that is considered the secret of rectification, of harmony, of integration, of bringing opposites together, the secret of paradox, where you have two seemingly antithetical positions that are mutually exclusive, and finding a way that they actually are united. And so the Zohar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, as we're going to see now, we're teaching that this structure of the Sefirot is the secret of tikkun, of bringing opposites together and unifying them. So this idea is, you'll see behind me, a whole lot of Magen Davids. Well, this is the secret of the Magen David. The Magen David is two opposite triangles that intersect. And what comes out of it is a synergy that makes a whole new structure. In other words, you take one triangle that's going down and one triangle that is going up. So those are two opposites, two directly opposite. But when you put them together, you get a whole new form. And that's called a form of rectification. That's one of the secrets of the Magen David. So here, I'm going to share one more time. This one again. Now, I want to show you that one of the secrets of the Sefirot is that they are many, many intersecting triangles. Keter, Chachma, and Bina is a triangle. Chachma, Bina, and Dat is a triangle. Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet is a triangle. Netzach, Hod, and Yesod is a triangle. And when we learn about this, we're going to see that these triangles are essential to understanding the Sefirot. But here we see other triangles. Look at this one, Keter, Chachma, and Dat. This also forms a triangle. Keter, Bina, and Dat creates a triangle. Tiferet, Hod, and Netzach creates a triangle. Tiferet, Netzach, and Yesod. So I hope you can see that there's many, many, many different triangles here. And the whole secret of this is the idea of the three lines representing thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This is so important. It's really critical to understand the Sefirot. So if we go back to what we reviewed already, we see that we shared already the idea that the Sefirot themselves manifest on three different levels of worlds, souls, and divinity. We saw that in the first mission of Sefer Yetzirah, that God created through three books, Sefer, Svar, and Sipur. Book, number, and story. And here we see that the Sefirot are all arranged in converging triangles. And if we go further, so then we see also that one of the secrets of Sefer Yetzirah, as we discussed last week, is Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. World, world, time, and consciousness. Space, time, and consciousness. Okay, so now I'm going to do one more sharing. Oh, here. This is what I was trying to show before. The idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This is running throughout all of the Sefirot. Again, the three lines. Thesis is a line, antithesis is a line, and synthesis is the middle. So this is one of the secrets of the Rambam always encouraging people to follow what's called the golden mean. not too far to the right, not too far to the left, but right in the middle. So we see that if you see this box here, so here we have 3 different teachings from the Baal Shem Tov, all based on triplets. In the right column, we see worlds, souls, and divinity, as we've discussed. On the left is something that we've discussed many times, that the Baal Shem says that all process goes through 3 stages of submission, in Hebrew, hachna'ah, separation, havdalah, and sweetening, hamtakah. What's an example of this? Very, very quickly. If you have a task that you want to accomplish, the task could take an hour, it could take a month, it could take a year, it could take 10 years. Someone's going to medical school or law school. It takes many, many, many years. So the first part of the process, again, even if it's an hour task, one has to submit one's energy and time and focus to accomplishing the task. That's what's called submission, submitting oneself to the task at hand. Separation is, now that I have the task and I'm determined to accomplish it, I need to go through a separation of arranging my time and energy and focus to separate those things that will take me away from accomplishing it and those that will bring me closer. So for example, if I have to accomplish something in a half an hour, I could tell someone in my family, if anyone calls, tell them I'll call them back. I can't talk right now. That's a process of separation. And then we have hamtakah, is where we get to the end of the task and we acknowledge that it's with God's help that we're able to accomplish anything. But also, how many times do we want to accomplish something and we work maybe very hard at it, but then in the end, it's not what we thought it would be. It's not sweet. It's like, I thought by doing this, I would feel this way, or I'd feel that way, or I'd accomplish this. So sweetening is that when we finish a task, we feel good about it. We feel we have accomplished it, and we're willing and happy to thank God for helping us. Okay, so there's also a very, very important statement in Pirkei Avot. Ha'olam omed al shlosha devarim. The world stands on 3 things: Torah, avodah, v'gemilut chasadim. The world stands on Torah, on service, sometimes translated as, in our day, as prayer, or serving God. They're doing the mitzvot or helping other people. And gemilut chasadim is acts of loving kindness. So the fact that the sages said the whole world stands on 3 things. This is the idea of the Sefirot standing on 3 axes, on 3 lines. Now, this is also true. We have a very, very important statement. Many of you heard this at a wedding or a Sheva Brachas, where the word for man and woman, ish and isha, 2 of the letters are exactly the same, aleph and shin. A man has a yud and a woman has a hey. So ish is aleph, yud, shin. A woman is aleph, shin, hey. And the famous statement in the Gemara is the yud and the hey is the name of God. So the Torah says, if you take away the Yud and the Hey, then what's left in a relationship? Fire. And eventually they will, in a sense, burn themselves out. But they say if the couple merits and the Yud and the Hey is between them, it says Shechina b'neihem. The Shekhinah, God's presence, will dwell between them. So that's what's called the third partner. That's why it says in the Talmud, there are three partners in the creation of a child. There's the man and the woman, and there's God. But just even in the relationship, if you take the third part out, then you're left just with the two. And then you get like this, you get the Aish. So that's just another example. So all of this is hinting to this idea of the structure of the Sefirot that we have today is a rectified structure. Again, it went through many progressions where first all of the Sefirot were in one vessel, and then there were 10 vessels, but those 10 vessels were either circles, which could not cooperate with each other, or just in a line, like a hierarchy, where there was no back and forth between them. And lastly, in our world, which is called Olam HaTikun, that the Sefirot are structured like this, but this symbolizes. Now, again, this is symbolic language, because we're talking about concepts, and this structure represents an idea. So it's not like in the DNA code where you can actually witness, you can actually see the chromosomes, you can see the proteins. That's not what we're talking about here. These are concepts that the Kabbalists have created models. Remember, we started with this, models that we can translate very, very deep, profound ideas into structures, models, and symbols that we can understand and then use. So I want to end this class with just a few ideas of where do the Sefirot come in Jewish tradition, in the mitzvot, in the prayers. Where do we see them? So I'm just going to give some examples. And the first example I'm going to give, and hopefully in future weeks, once we go through the Sefirot, which hopefully will be the next 2 weeks, we're going to go through what are called the outer manifestation of the Sefirot in the way they manifest in the world, and the first and the third stages, the way, as it were, God shines his light into this world. And then we're going to learn what are called the inner dimensions of the Sefirot, which apply to the soul. So Rav Ginsburg, over the years, and I'm not exaggerating whatsoever, has created hundreds and hundreds of models of taking ideas, concepts, and arranging them according to the Sefirot. So I want to give an example, because many of you might have seen this, and if not, you can go to YouTube or the Galinai station. That it was around 2 or 3 years, Rav Ginsburg gave a monthly English class in Jerusalem, which was then live streamed all over the world and then put on YouTube, and really thousands of people watched each one of the videos. Many of the classes, what he did is he took personalities. He took Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, David, Moshe, the Imahot, and he explained them according to the Sefirot. I found this so enlightening. In other words, just for example, he took Avraham Avinu, and he explained where do we see the keter of Avraham Avinu? Where do we see the chachma, the bina, the dat? In English, where do we see the supraconscious level of Avraham? Where do we see his wisdom? Where do we see his level of understanding, of knowledge, of chesed, loving kindness, of gevura, his strength, his teferet, his beauty and harmony, his netzach, his ability to be victorious? And he would go in one class through all these different levels. And what you come out with, instead of I'll call it a 1 or 2 dimensional understanding of Avraham Avinu, all of a sudden you see how multidimensional he is. And almost everything he mentioned comes from a story in the Torah, or a midrash, or a statement in the Gemara about Avraham Avinu. And so he took these different events or incidences in his life and showed how they manifested the different Sefirot. Now remember, when we learned the inner dimensions of the Sefirot apply to the soul. It's the structure of the soul. So that's an example, but in hundreds of different ways, Rav Ginsburg has created charts of the Sefirot with concepts that correspond. We will be going through some of these to give examples. Now, I'm going to mention now, because when we're done with the Sefirot, hopefully we're going to learn about the different names of God, but especially the 4-letter name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now, in this aspect, Rav Ginsburg has done an amazing, amazing thing. Is he has not even hundreds, at this point, thousands of models of how we can understand reality, view reality. Our perspective of reality according to the 4 letters of God's name. That we will get into, but I just wanted to mention that. Probably the place that we see the Sefirot in the most broadest manner and the most concentrated manner is during Sfirat HaOmer. Now that's almost a play on words, because Sfirat HaOmer means counting the Omer, meaning counting the 49 days between Pesach and Shavuos. And every day we count a day, but it's become a universal practice that each day we count a combination of Sefirot in order to know what is the spiritual work of that day. Because we're told that we had reached the 49th level of impurity in Egypt. And the goal is to every day exchange a level of impurity for a level of purity. And we kind of climb the mountain until we get to the top, and that is Shavuos. That's where we receive the Torah. So the exchange of a level of impurity for a level of purity means spiritual work, what's called tikkun midot, of fixing our characteristics, fixing our personality. And so each week of the Sefirot HaOmer is one of the Sefirot. The first week, the whole week is the week of Chesed. And the second week is the week of Gevura. But every day, since there's 7 days in a week, so we combine Sefirot, Chesed Sheba Chesed, Gevura Sheba Chesed, Teferet Sheba Chesed. And each day, we do the spiritual work of those combination of Sefirot. And we do this for 7 weeks. That's a big chunk of the year that we're concentrating on using the Sefirot as a means of very, very personal improvement. Instead of a 12-step program, it's a 49-step program. So this is probably the place that we see the Sefirot the most. We just finished Tu B'Shvat. And I know on this Shabbos, I give a class every Shabbos, and the whole class was on the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. And one of the main components was to see how the 7 fruits combine with the 7 lower Sefirot. Why is Chita associated with Chesed? Why is barley associated with Gevura? Why is our grapes associated with Tiferet? And the connections make the understanding so deep. There are so many different things in Jewish tradition that have to do with 7s. I remember when I was in Denver, and we were a youth group, leaders, directors, and we had a Shabbaton, and I don't remember what Parsha was, but after the meal Friday night, so we always played games, but with a Torah theme. So the game is we divided into groups, and we couldn't write, but everyone in the group had to remember how many things can you think of in Jewish tradition that have 7 of them. And I remember afterwards, when everyone exchanged their notes, there was like 40 different major things in Jewish tradition that have 7s in them. But anything that has 7 in them, essentially, almost by definition, is going to relate to the 7 lower Sefirot. Just like anything that you'll have 3 of is going to relate to Chachma, Bina, and Dat. So this is another place where 7s come in. And that's why throughout Kabbalah and Chassidut, when we're talking about whether it's the 7 days of Pesach or the 7 days of Sukkot, or the Kala going around the Chatan 7 times, or 7 days of celebration, all of them are connected in different ways to the Sefirot. I want to end with a really fascinating one. And this is how we'll end, and then we'll have our usual question and answer period. So on Yom Kippur, at the end of Yom Kippur, end of Ne'ilah, the emotional climax of Ne'ilah is the whole congregation. Well, first the person leading the prayers usually yells out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. One time. And then 3 times, Baruch, Shem, Kavod, Malchuto, Le'olam Bo'ed. Blessed is the name, the glory of the name of God forever. 3 times. And then we say 7 times, Hashem Hu HaElokim. These 2 names of God. Hopefully, our next series, when we get to the names of God, we'll discuss it more. But Hashem Hu HaElokim, 7 times. So if you see, there's 1 and 3 and 7. And this arranges itself perfectly with the Sefirot, where here, Shema Yisrael is Keter. And remember, there is a Sefirah here of Dat. So Shema Yisrael is Keter. Chachma, Bina, and Dat are the 3 times we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Bo'ed. And then the lower 7 is Hashem Hu HaElokim. Hashem Hu HaElokim. So here, at the end of Ne'ilah, it's like we're drawing down this last influx of divine, holy, spiritual energy into ourselves and our communities. And it really is, these are like the channels that are drawing this energy into ourselves. So we'll end the class here. Next week, God willing, we will be looking at the individual Sefirot one at a time and going through them, and hopefully in a way that everyone, whether someone is familiar with the Sefirot or not familiar, everyone hopefully will walk away with something. So we should all be blessed with a good week and everything good.